Do you remember when Stevie Wonder took us through A Secret Life of Plants? Now, people in my Gen X generation vaguely may remember it because we were kind of in our tweens when this album came out in 1979. I distinctly remember it because I distinctly remember my father going off on how bad this album was, and it was nothing like Stevie Wonder had ever done. Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm Michael Douglas. Welcome back to Dr. Pundit, where we talk about music, not medicine. And on this edition, I want to talk about Stevie Wonder. Particularly, some regard this as a career misstep. Others kind of overlook it as a little hobby kind of recording, a side recording, while he was still at the top of his game. However you choose to look at The Secret Life of Plants, I find it's a fascinating album to talk about in the canon of Stevie Wonder's career. Now, one of the hallmarks of a great artist is the willingness to let the heart dictate an artist's direction, rather than letting the fans or even radio stations or sales dictate the direction the artist should go in. Now, Stevie Wonder was just coming off the third of 3 albums of the year, at the Grammys, a record which has since been eclipsed or equaled by Taylor Swift. That tells you how big this guy was in the 1970s. Songs in the Key of Life was his most recent double album up to that point, released in 1976. And Stevie Wonder was very passionate about many left-leaning causes at the time, and still is. One of those was the environment. And he basically made kind of a head-scratching move when he was approached to write and perform a documentary about plant-based environmental type causes, presentations. And the result of the album was the journey through the secret life of plants. Looking back on it, I regard this album as nothing more than a diversion within a very storied and extremely successful career that didn't derail Stevie Wonder's career at any point. He was still riding high and would have a tremendous and successful subsequent few years throughout the 1980s. Throughout the 1960s and the 1970s, of course the 70s, arguably Stevie Wonder's most successful decade in music, he was just as prolific as he was successful, roughly releasing an album every year up until that time if you were to average it out. Now, of course, I was too young to remember this, but Stevie Wonder, throughout the period between Songs in the Key of Life in 76 and Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants in 79, this was the longest gap he had had in many years, ever since basically his career started between albums. I think it's fair to say that anticipation was high for Stevie to even replicate or overcome that success and even build upon it from his third of 3 albums of the year, Songs in the Key of Life. But of course, The Secret Life of Plants threw a lot of people for a loop. Now, the soundtrack that Stevie ended up making was based on a 1979 documentary by Christopher Bird and Peter Tompkins. Both the book and the documentary aimed to illuminate the surprising and even human-like characteristics of plant life. Stevie Wonder was a fan, and of course he was thrilled at the chance of creative control over this project. His famous blindness, of course, didn't stop him from this pursuit. He basically had filmmakers describe each scene in the documentary to Stevie, and through his thoughts and what he imagined, he would construct the soundtrack based upon these scenes. Now, he also recorded this album digitally, at the time very advanced. And this was one of the first time this had ever been accomplished on a vinyl LP. He used synthesizers, and these synthesizers basically deployed a primitive form of digital recording at the time. So, very avant-garde release for Stevie Wonder. So what's featured on this album? Most of the album featured kind of new agey vibes juxtaposing with some funkier passages. And now and again, there are some songs with lyrics sprinkled through, inspired by the themes of the film that did pop up. Some of these including Black Orchid, that's a track, and The Secret Life of Plants, the album's title, could actually do hold up on their own when you listen to them. The only fully vocalized song was the only top 40 song released from the album, an album that gave us the track Sin When You're Love. When you listen to this track in the context of the whole album, you can see that some of the influences that Stevie Wonder did place on a lot of these instrumental tracks did kind of flow in to the texture of Sin When You're Love, one of his biggest top 5 hits. But of course, many people, including his fan base, were expecting an album full of material like Songs in the Key of Life. And it didn't help that this album was aggressively marketed as a typical Stevie Wonder release. And maybe that was the biggest mistake by Stevie's label, Motown Tamla. And people were just hungry for another smash. Well, they did have one in the single release of Sin When You're Love, but they wouldn't have to wait long because in 1980, Stevie released a highly successful album, Hotter Than July, which gave us the hits I Ain't Gonna Stand For It, Happy Birthday, Master Blaster Jammin'. So yes, there was a little bit of a lull, but Stevie came back with full force with another slammin' hit on his hand to kick off the 1980s. And looking back on it, I wouldn't say that Secret Life of Plants was a flop. It just was poorly marketed to a fan base who was used to this hit-making machine and just left their heads scratching at this momentary hobby and diversion by one of the biggest R&B and soul artists of the late 20th century. I'm Michael Douglas. If you like what you see here on the channel, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. And as the late great Barry White always used to say, let the music play. And I'll see you on the next episode.